Welcome to Taking Up Space, the podcast with conversations exploring what it means to inhabit our bodies fully, without shame or apology, and reconnect with our innate wisdom to find healing and body liberation. I'm your host, Cassie Krajewski, a licensed clinical social worker and certified sex therapist. For over 10 years, I've worked with folks to reclaim their bodies, their inner knowing, and their lives in a world that often seeks to diminish their voices and experiences. Through personal stories, expert interviews, and candid discussions with guests, we'll unpack the societal norms and expectations that interrupt our embodiment, like trauma, oppression, illness and pain, and the social constructs of gender, race, sexuality, beauty, health, and weight. My hope is that through this podcast, we'll learn to drop into our bodies and occupy space, physically, emotionally, relationally, and intellectually, with confidence and authenticity. So join me as we challenge societal norms, explore what it means to find wholeness, and reclaim our right to take up space as an act of resistance and body liberation. While this podcast might feel therapeutic, it is not psychotherapy and doesn't constitute a therapist-client relationship. This is a good time to mention, too, that this podcast will at times use adult language, so listener discretion is advised. Hey there, welcome to another episode of Taking Up Space. Today, we're talking about reclaiming pleasure and desire, which is one of my most favorite things to talk about as it relates to our own body liberation and embodiment. And we have an incredible expert on the topic joining us today as we explore this, Dr. Brittney Ellers. Let me introduce you to Dr. Brittney. She's a holistic pelvic physical therapist who has dedicated her life to breaking the chains of silence around the vital aspect of well-being that's located in our pelvis. With a doctorate in physical therapy, Brittney discovered her calling when she was navigating her own profound healing within her menstrual cycle and pelvic floor pain, and she transcended the shadows of shame around sex, body, and pleasure. Brittney firmly believes that the pelvis is the root, the center of life, creativity, and confidence. Through her expertise, she guides us gracefully through evolving life seasons with ease, helping you embody the brightest version of yourself. In her private practice, Dr. Ellers has become a beacon of light, empowering hundreds of folks to overcome pelvic health issues and reclaim their lives with joy. Her mission is clear: tackle the taboo, openly educate about pelvic issues, and guide others towards healing and creating profound connection with yourself inside and out, embracing both your pussy and heart. And yes, we're reclaiming the word pussy here. And just to preface some of our conversation within the realm of taking up space, taking up space means you're not minimizing yourself to make others comfortable, but rather embracing who you are authentically. And pleasure is intricately wrapped up in that process of taking up space. So giving yourself permission for pleasure centers your birthright in allowing yourself to experience joy, fulfillment, and satisfaction without guilt or shame. And it's about acknowledging that pleasure is a fundamental part of the human experience and that you also deserve to indulge in activities, experiences, and relationships that bring you happiness and fulfillment. Giving yourself permission for pleasure involves prioritizing self-care, setting aside time for activities that nourish your soul, and letting go of any judgment or self-imposed limitations or societal imposed limitations that may prevent you from fully enjoying your life. It's about embracing pleasure as a natural and essential aspect of your well-being. So Dr. Brittney is here. We're going to explore that and more. She's such a treat to share space with. She's so kind and authentic and whip smart. So it makes approaching this topic so much more comfortable and open to possibilities and creativity of what it could be like to rediscover your pleasure and desire. And I know for so many folks listening who have had marginalization of any kind, pleasure has not maybe felt accessible or open to you in your various identities. So we're going to tackle that in this episode too. So without further delay, let's get into our conversation with Brittney. Hey there, Brittney. Welcome to Taking Up Space. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cassie. I'm so excited to be here. Talk about
Yes.
all things pleasure, pelvises.
Yes, I'm here for pleasure and pelvises too. Maybe we can just start with you sharing a little bit more about who you are, the work you do, how you got into this work too. I think that's probably a really intentional reason. You don't just fall into this line of work.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I'm definitely the mess that becomes your message person.
Mm,
I mean, I got into physical therapy. I'm a by trade a physical therapist, but got into that just because I was so interested in movement and the human body and science. But yeah, just love to help people. And then it was after I was working for about a year and a half as a just basic sports med, kind of orthopedic physical therapist. I had my own issues regarding my pelvic floor. I had Actually, it's kind of a funny story now that I look back at it, but I
yeah.
used a vibrator for a quickie for myself right
Uh-huh.
before work one time. It was like a 5-minute session. I popped out of bed and went straight to work. And I think I just ended up aggravating my nerves down there. And it ended up feeling like urge incontinence, which is like the constant feeling of having to go to the bathroom and maybe not being able to control it. But every time I would try to go to the bathroom, it just nothing would come out. It was a little painful, kind of on the verge of also feeling good in a weird way.
Yeah.
And I mean, on top of that, too, I carried a lot of stress there in that particular area of my body, a little hypertonic, so a little tight
Mhm.
and not in the good way. And I ended up working with a pelvic physical therapist who I was treating at the time, actually, for her own stuff.
Mhm.
And she just coached me into down regulating my nervous system, which I was very familiar with, as also a yoga instructor background as well, and breath
Mhm.
work. And I was just so floored with how simple that was, but also with the amount of pain that I actually felt there.
Mm.
And then, I mean, it's such a layered process, my story, right? Because at the same time, I was on a form of birth control. I was on the patch and it had been 10 years off and on of being on different types of birth control. And I was honestly in this space of curiosity, like, what is my menstrual cycle going to look like if I come off of it? Am I going to be regular? I was just, yeah, it was a whole interesting thing where all of a sudden I was segueing off birth control. I was learning about prenatal yoga. I was learning about pelvic floor. And at one point, I found myself in a talk about women, medicine, and power. And Kimberly Ann Johnson, who is a psychological body worker, just like women's work, nervous system work, amazing doula and author. And she was speaking and she basically had me in tears at the end of her talk. And I was like, wait, what can I do to help these women like experiencing these maybe traumatic births or postpartum or anything like that? And she was like, if you have the chops, get into pelvic PT. And I was like, oh, I have the chops.
Uh-huh.
So,
Mhm.
I mean, and to layer even more into that, I came from a pretty strict household, Christian, religious upbringing. My dad was a pastor since retired, and just a lot of stigma and shame around
Mhm.
sexuality. And this is, I mean, it's interesting too, right? Where I was just given a lot of information, but not a lot of information. It was more like mentalities,
Yes.
like sex is sacred and should be saved for marriage, for the one person, and this is shameful. You shouldn't hang out with other boys like by yourself. All these kinds of things about how a girl should be in her society. And I had a lot of undoing, unlearning to go
Mhm.
through. And I
Mhm.
feel like my work with reclaiming my menstrual cycle, so just really honoring the phases I'm in, playing with what and exploring and talking about what it is that I really want my sexuality to be. And that includes more self-pleasure, that is more intentional and slow,
Mhm.
and honoring
Mhm.
a woman's physiology.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was part of my own work and has landed me in the space where now, I mean, I still go by holistic pelvic physical therapist at this point, but really I feel like what I'm being called to do is educate and facilitate or guide other women into knowing their bodies in such a deep and authentic way that feels so safe and just empowered.
Mhm.
Because
Mm.
it's so good when you get to that space. And I do it for the past version of me that just
Mhm.
didn't know any better.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, there's a lot of great information that I feel like women need to know.
Yes, I mean, I love hearing your story because I think so many women can find themselves in it of just being really cut off from really essential information about their bodies, their intuition, their knowing, and having to unlearn and reconnect in a world that tells a lot of women that their body is dangerous or it's scary or out of control or a problem, something to fix, broken
Gross.
and gross. Yeah, it just finding just such humanness in you and that you've walked that road, I
Mm.
think creates a lot of safety.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious, like when you talk about pelvic, what's included in that for you? Like I think sometimes even that language, like so many people don't even know what pelvic health even means, right? What's included in that or the components of that. Like, can you share a bit more of how you think about and define that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because to me, I mean, I have to look at things holistically now. And it's funny because in PT school, and I'm sure in school for you too, you learn the biopsychosocial model. And
Mhm.
it's, I mean, I feel like that's still pretty true, right? You have your bio, your anatomy, your physiology. So to me, first, if we kind of hit that area, it's like the bony structure, the musculature around your pelvis, it's the nervous system, it's all the organs that the pelvic floor and the pelvic bowl itself holds and contains. And then if you take that over the cross of someone's lifespan, that starts at a very young age and like
Mhm.
stability and balance and peeing and pooping and then maybe later on menstruation and sex and maybe pregnancy, maybe birth, all the other things in between that, and then postpartum, of course, and then of course later on maybe it's menopause.
Mm.
So there's like a whole slew within that. But then if you just bring about the social or the psycho model there, I mean, there's so many other layers to that too. But I'm someone who also truly believes in like the energetics and emotions that can literally be expressed through the body, whether
Mhm.
that's disease. And those things can get trapped there and they can get worked there and released through there. And I feel like women have a very big upper hand here potentially. If you think of your, I mean, I use the word pussy. It's a reclamation, of course, for me too.
Yes. Yes,
Um,
that is welcome here.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I mean, because to me, yoni is okay, that's Sanskrit and great.
Mhm.
And I love that word too. But pussy is also just, it feels like oomph. And it does
Yes.
also encapsulate all of this stuff like
Mhm.
the bones, the muscles, the nerves, the organs, the energy and emotion that lives there, the sexuality, the creative essence, like just power. It's the
Mhm.
root. It's where we all kind of came from. And
Mm.
it's literally the yoni verse, right? So I
Mm.
feel like we have this upper hand where if we can see her as a portal for what we
Mhm.
take in as well as what we can release out, it's a powerful tool, honestly, for alchemy in life. And
Mhm.
whether you do that through self-touch practice, pleasure practice, yoni steaming, free bleeding, working externally, working internally all the way, like doing de-armoring practices, breath work,
Mm.
it's such a beautiful way to live truly in your body, feeling fully embodied all the way down to the root. That's, I feel like, pelvic health right there. Because from there, right, if you can fully embody that space, you walk around with confidence, with true self-love
Mm.
and authenticity.
Mhm.
And then you, from whatever other spaces like you fill up, like you are living out your purpose essentially. Like you feel like you can.
Mhm.
And something I feel like people maybe also don't even always recognize is that your pussy, that energy is connected up through the throat, and like the throat chakra, I refer to chakras too sometimes, right? And
Yeah.
how could it not? If you know about the anatomy or you've maybe seen images, they look very similar, but also to know that they come from the same stem cells when you're in utero. And then when
Oh,
you,
say more. I don't know this.
yeah, everything that formulates the larynx, the vocal cords, all that energy in your throat, right? Those
Huh.
same stem cells are the same ones that
Whoa.
make up your vagina, your
Wow.
pelvic floor, your vulva, all of that. And it makes sense, right? When you think about digestion, your food starts in your mouth usually
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
makes its way out through your pelvis.
Mm.
I mean, you think about people giving birth and the way that the jaw, everything has to remain soft in the mouth for the pelvic floor to open and just let the uterus do its thing of pushing the baby out, like
Mm.
ejecting the baby. It's all about remaining like open and soft. And if you have like a grippy, tight, clenchy jaw, the same thing is going to happen to your pelvic floor, but same thing with your throat. It can create this like openness and
Mhm.
it's like a little rainbow, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
The connections that I'm making are just how the pussy is such a portal, like you said, and an opportunity for reclamation of truth and intuition. And now I'm making the connection of voice and how that's expressed in the world. It's
Yeah.
just so wild to me that something so essential, so foundational to our health and well being is cut off
Hmm.
for so many people. There's a lack of information, there's a lack of comfort to go there and talk about this. And I mean, for someone who's maybe hearing this conversation in this space, like they have felt very disconnected from their pelvic region and they're not really sure how to initiate connecting again. Like, what would you say is a good starting point? Like, how can they start to get to know this aspect of themselves and start to enter that portal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like there's so many different entry points to it, depending also on where you are in your life cycle. If you're someone midlife, you're still menstruating, I feel like even just tracking your menstrual cycle or
Mm.
inspecting your blood, inspecting your underwear every time you go to the bathroom for the cervical mucus that shows you basically your vitality.
Mhm, mhm,
It's considered the fifth
mm,
vital sign for a reason, right?
mhm.
And like that is honestly a simple way. But if you're someone who's more, okay, I actually want to feel my body, you
Yeah.
can, of course, practice moving it. You can feel your sits bones when you sit, waddling side to side. You can rock your pelvis forward and back. Notice what the boundaries are within maybe just even your pelvic floor, your hips, your inner thighs. If you're someone who's like kind of ready to take a dive into your pelvic floor, your external genitalia, or even internally, vaginally around the cervix. You could do a hands-on practice, a
Mhm,
wand in practice, a yoni egg practice.
mhm.
If if that touch kind of thing is not your favorite, you can use a pelvic wand. Those are amazing too. I've
Mhm.
actually, it's been an interesting journey even to witness as a teacher, as a guide. There are
Mm.
some people who even to the touch, like the touch fingers to their body doesn't feel good. There's
Right.
a little bit of an ick to
Okay.
it. And
Yep.
even if, say, someone has scar tissue, right? Say
Mhm,
you've had a cesarean or you had an episiotomy or just any kind of tearing during birth,
mhm,
or even from any kind of other rupture in your life, a boundary rupture, abuse, like
mhm,
working and touching with the tissue like might be a little too intense. So doing it a little more indirectly with a wand could be great.
mhm.
Honestly, using a mirror,
Yeah.
just looking
Yeah.
at yourself,
Yes. Mhm.
like I feel like looking at a mirror, honestly, too, like it's such a powerful practice. It's
Yeah.
confronting. It can be confronting, but if you walk into that with kind of an open, curious
Mhm,
mind versus a pre-judgment kind of mind,
mhm,
it
mhm.
could be really enlightening.
Yeah, I love the beginner's mind, the openness that seems like needs to come, especially if this is all new,
Yeah.
right? And we have all these messages around our bodies in general, and maybe specifically around our pelvis or our pussy, or like what that needs to be or should be. Like the act of bringing a mirror, I could see being activating, but also being also very empowering and a place of reclamation. Like, this is my body, and look at
Yes.
what it can do. Look at how it
Yes.
functions and operates and supports me and gives me so much information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, again, it's a portal. It's a treasure trove of information, like you just said. Like
Mhm.
all of those signs for vitality for sure. And I feel like something cool to do maybe with a mirror is actually watch yourself, like while you breathe, notice how
Mm,
there's just generally a little bit of movement. At
yeah.
least you kind of hope so, because even though this is something too that I think about a lot is okay, we're talking about it like it's a floor. And maybe in some people's minds, that means it needs to be really stiff and stagnant. But no, like we want her to be resilient
Mm,
and flexible, malleable, responsive,
mm,
right? Nothing in our bodies should remain stagnant.
yeah.
And then I wanted to kind of touch back in on, I don't know, like just if the hands-on or like the actual movement of the body feels like too much, of course, like maybe a top-down approach, like thinking about all of the beliefs that you might have about your body,
Mm,
that you have about your period, that you have about sex or relationships, that you have about pregnancy and birth and motherhood or whatever. Like those are also big access points too, if you just want to almost think and process through some of it and then
mhm,
recognize where in your body this may have landed.
mhm,
Like, what do you even believe about what it means to be a woman or a female or like feminine energy? How have people modeled that for you or embodied that?
mm,
And is there a way that you'd want to maybe tweak that, redo that, reclaim it, or adjust it in any way for
mhm,
yourself?
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes work with clients that just feel like very skeptical of doing this work, or maybe like encountering the body in this way, and oh well, the messages I receive, they aren't that bad, or it doesn't impact me too much. And a pivot that I invite them to consider is this what you'd want for your own child? Like, how would you want them to relate to their body? And for some reason that just shifts it, right? Of, I don't
Mhm.
want this actually for anyone, including myself. And maybe there's something there to stay curious too.
Yes, I love that. And I feel like I don't know, do you think that is coming from a place of maybe what they're, yeah, like they're minimizing their own experiences or like maybe there's a level of like unworthiness to make those adjustments? I mean, yeah, that's what I encounter too. Um,
Yeah, I think it can be a sense of unworthiness, or just real fear too, of what if I explore, and what if I find something out, or maybe it's too hard, or maybe I can't. For a lot of women that I work with that feel like they have low desire, quote unquote, and feel very broken in that way. What if I do this work and it turns out that I am actually broken? And so I'm just going to stay where I'm familiar and what I know. I think that can be a part of it too.
I think that can be a big part of it for sure. And it also is just reminding me of that one phrase. It's not the question of whether you'll fail, like you're potentially fearful of succeeding.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like it does open up the floodgates for all this other stuff potentially.
Yeah, because there's so much held there, like you've said, right?
Yeah. For me, there was definitely this fear of being ostracized and not belonging
Mhm. Mm,
in stepping into this work, and
mhm.
specifically more so around like my family.
Yeah.
But I mean, the more I've just owned it and also kind of living by my human design a little bit with being a projector, I wait for my
Yeah.
invitation. I don't push on people who have
Mhm.
not recognized or invited me in to share this stuff.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I feel like, okay, my family and I have clear boundaries around this
Yeah.
stuff, and
Yeah.
it's made for honestly like a stronger connection with us.
Mm,
So that's really good too. But
mhm.
I can see that fear being there for some people too.
Yeah, and I think for some people too, I think there's just been such fragmentation that they've experienced in their body, whether it's from some type of trauma or body image issues, and it's not okay to be in my body or my body's not okay as is, that just makes it a little bit safer to live up in their head and thinking and intellectualizing versus like feeling and being. And um, something that I know that you do is feminine embodiment work, like really helping women get embodied. And I'd love to just hear more about that scope. I mean, I think all of what you do is helping people get embodied, right? But maybe more of like the aspect of like how, like the trajectory that you see women go through when they start to be in their body again.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny because I think a lot of people come to me right off the bat to maybe fix something. And the
Mm,
body will speak to you, right? Like I said, in terms of disease, pain, like
mhm,
I always say this too, and it's kind of been true, at least in my experience. It's like people don't really change until they're in enough pain. Like they've passed a
mhm.
threshold
Yeah.
finally to where they want to get help and maybe change something. So I feel like I'm getting people to come in this way. And what I end up doing, right, is okay, yeah, we might make some physical therapy in quotes, manual treatments, emotional help potentially, and just like helping them bridge these connections in their life. Um, and I feel like once they kind of understand that there are these connections, then it's I'm there to present this mirror, like this
Mhm.
little mirror, and see if they can start to tune into themselves a little bit more because like we were saying off recording, I don't want to be looked at as the authority for someone else. There is an inner authority for each and every one of us, and everything that we might need is going to be unique from one person to the next.
Mhm.
So, like, my treatment plans are never like one size fits all, obviously, right?
Mhm.
And from there, if they can start to practice this inner trust as well as, when I do my one-on-one sessions, it's very much a practice of can I speak my needs, my desires, my boundaries. I mean, I am in this constant practice of just like asking a million questions, which to some people might feel really annoying, but also it's, are you sure? That's kind of the
Yeah.
thing. Can
Yeah.
you be sure? Can you state with truth
Mm,
and in an honoring of your body, like the pace that you want to go at, what feels actually good for you to do today,
mm,
not just forcing yourself through something. And I mean, yeah, that's in kind of the one-on-one practices, but even like virtually online doing some guided experiences
mm,
for hands-on touch and self-exploration, which can or doesn't have to be pleasurable. There's no goal or objective in mind to like orgasm or anything like that. But if you happen to experience pleasure, great. Take note of that for yourself because that could be handy when you do another session
Yeah.
or you have an
Mhm.
experience with a partner. It's just more information to have for yourself to know how your body actually operates. I feel like what I hope for women is that when they do this work, they feel this sense of self-connection so much in a way that they could just walk out and walk around the world feeling really confident, really
Mm,
self-assured,
mm,
really authentic and truthful to themselves and to others. Like
mhm.
keeping I feel like too, and I'm guilty of this as well, right? This is why I know. It's like we're sometimes our worst like trespassers of our own
Totally.
boundaries.
Totally. Yes.
And I see it a
Uh,
lot within the self-pleasure practices.
uh-huh. Oh,
You
I'd
know,
love to hear more. Yes. Say
yeah.
more what you're seeing there.
Well, there's just like a resistance. Totally
Mm,
get it. Like,
mhm.
why
To
carve
actual
out?
self-pleasure in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even to the word, right? I've talked about this before too. And the word pleasure can be a little to some
Yeah.
people. So,
Yes.
okay, call it whatever you need to. A solo play, masturbation to keep it simple, self-exploration,
Mm,
whatever. But even to reclaim that word pleasure, you can find joy. I want you to be able to find joy in your body. And the resistance can be there for sure, but then also the rushing. There's always this like weird expectation almost for your body to open to you and force it to feel good. And but we're running out of time. Like we got to just get there. And
uh,
it's, well, what if that wasn't even the goal? What
Mhm.
if that would take that completely off the table? Take penetration off the table
Yeah.
and notice what you can cultivate within yourself.
Mhm.
If you give yourself the actual time where physiologically it can take a woman anywhere between 25 to 45 minutes to become fully engorged in the
Right.
way, if you think of a penis, right, getting fully engorged
Yeah.
in 2 minutes max.
Mhm.
Imagine having an orgasm at that level versus like in the 5 minutes that, for example, I experienced, where all of a sudden things actually feel painful
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
dysfunctional.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
feel like that's kind of the energy of feminine for me too, is like this softening, this opening, this
Mm.
slow
No.
flow and nourishment that just feels really giving, and giving it
Mhm.
back into yourself, right?
Mhm.
Spending that time with yourself, I think is so potent if we give ourselves that opportunity. But that's kind of like our first thing, right? We
Yeah.
have to kind of let ourselves have that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think so many of us are conditioned to look outward, right? For the benchmark or the rule or the goal. And it totally bypasses everything that's like the information that we're getting from within. Like we just totally cut it off. And I have noticed that you've used like pronouns to refer to the pelvis and to the
Mm,
pussy. And it just makes me think, yeah, this is a relationship to
yeah.
build this, find this joy in your body. I mean, you find this isn't something you just push upon yourself, right? Based on some kind of arbitrary something. It's like
Oh yeah.
really tuning in, building a trusting relationship with your body and with your pussy so that it can work, you can work collaboratively to find that joy, nourishment, care.
Absolutely. I mean, in the end, all I want for women is for them to feel embodied and empowered so that they can
Mm.
fulfill whatever purpose they feel is their purpose while they're living here on this planet. That's all I end up like really want.
Yeah, not super radical, right?
Yeah, not radical at all, but easy peasy when you just have to touch your pussy.
Yeah, right. Okay, so let's go there. So let's say someone listening is like, oh, maybe I could consider a self pleasure practice or some kind of different way of relating with my pelvis. I mean, how might you recommend people get started? And are there some guidelines for people to keep in mind as they're considering establishing a self pleasure practice that you find helpful?
Yeah, I feel like there's so many things. And the thing that's coming to mind, a collection of these kinds of ideas, is my Moonlit Muse rituals. It's a free ebook
Mm.
that I have available to
Yeah.
anyone who's curious. And I kind of flavor it in a way where if you're menstruating or you want to follow the moon cycles, you can kind of sync your rituals or your pleasure practices or self-care, however you want to describe them,
Mhm.
or one that makes you actually want to do them if that's
Mhm.
nourishing
Yeah,
for you.
something you'd look forward to actually. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't
Mhm.
want that's like the last thing I want is for a
Yeah.
self-pleasure practice to feel overwhelming, because it really can look like anything, and it
Mhm.
doesn't have anything to do with touching your pussy.
Yeah.
It could be going out for a nature walk. It could be calling a friend that you really are excited to talk to. It could be taking a bath, reading your favorite book, listening to your favorite podcast. Like all of those I feel like could be considered pleasurable, hopefully, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, it's then you find these opportunities where, I mean, if you're taking a bath or you're taking a shower, you're already naked. Maybe you spend some
Mhm.
time like going slower while you're loofahing yourself or dry brushing yourself,
Mhm.
and take some time to actually feel your breasts while you're rubbing some oils or massaging with lotion. Notice what's there. Notice if there's any tenderness. Notice if there's any softening, if there's any sense of arousal or pleasure. And you can go to whatever edge feels good for you, right? And sometimes that means maybe crossing your boundary a little bit. Oh shit, like that was a little too
Oh,
fast for
found
me.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And then you can always take a step back, go slower again, and like brush your hair a little bit more slowly. Take a moment while you're doing your makeup or doing your face for the day, applying sunscreen, and you're just acknowledging like what you like about yourself.
Oh, I
Yeah,
love how accessible this is. It's like bringing such intentional awareness and just being with that, slowing down and being with it and staying really curious to what
exactly.
your body gives you.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated. It
Yeah.
can be as simple as all of these things that we already all do, but
Mhm.
just doing it with more intention, maybe slowing it down a little bit, breathing into these experiences. And then maybe one day when you are ready to have a self-pleasure practice, explore your edges there, explore all the different tools that are there. I feel like, I mean, so many things are still taboo, even if you're in this work. It's like anal play, and that
Yeah.
doesn't need to be penetrative at all. That can just be around the nerve endings of the skin that live right there that might feel good, might feel like too much for some, but
Mhm.
even that can be really pleasurable and explorative and a new sense of reclamation.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, using different kinds of wands, having different intentions with that. Maybe you're exploring a range of orgasm, not
Mm.
again that it would be a goal, but just to see like, what can this feel like if I spend a little more time in this area or
Mhm.
this area or stay external and then maybe add a little internal or maybe play with the anus, maybe play with the perineum.
Mhm.
Maybe it's just G-spot. Maybe it's more of a cervical opening. What if I come back up to the breasts? What if I bring that energy around my body and start moving and breathing with a little arching of my back, like
Mhm.
softening my belly, make sure I'm not clenching my abs, relax the face, make
Yeah.
sounds, just like playing up into the senses
So
a little
many,
bit.
yeah, so many options, and there's no have tos. I mean, it's your body. That's what just coming. Of course, it's my body. Why wouldn't I want and be curious about exploring it? There's just
Right.
such opportunity in it.
Right, right. I mean, I feel like if I have some big meeting or something to go to, or say if I was going to have a big ask for something else, or yeah, presenting myself in a big way, it's like I would probably just have a self-pleasure practice
Uh-huh.
and find what my real needs and wants are. And then I'd go off into the world and express that. And
Mhm.
not going to say that the pussy and this energy is something to be manipulated, but sometimes you get what you want.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So the topic of this podcast is taking up space. I mean, pushing back against these societal messages that tell us to be small and obedient and demure and silent or quiet. And I think as I'm thinking about the pelvis, it's not those things, right? It's just
No.
so potentially so expansive and big and expressive and messy at times,
Oh
and
yeah,
just how countercultural it can feel, I think, for so many women to really embrace all of that and take up space with
totally.
their
Uh,
body in that way.
I have one little thought on that
Yeah.
because it's like another practice you could potentially do. Let yourself pee and don't rush that process. Don't feel
Oh,
rushed to get
yes.
there and don't feel rushed to finish. Especially if you're in a public bathroom where you feel like someone else is listening, take up space in your stall.
Yes. Oh, I love this so much.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I just
Uh-huh.
had a friend say that she felt like she made connection with a friend or someone outside of the bathroom stall, and they both went in the bathroom and she had to take a shit. And
Yeah.
she felt like in that moment she couldn't do it because someone else was listening and that person knew who she was. And it's bro, like everybody poops.
Right?
And yeah, sometimes it smells. And yeah, sometimes it's loud. Like you said, it's messy. It can be messy. And
Mhm.
it's okay. I mean, at least you're in the
Yeah.
place where it's meant to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, right? Of all places, that's the place. Just like the self-objectification in that, right? Like how there's just such monitoring of that.
Yeah,
Oof.
it's a layer of censorship that doesn't need to be there,
Yeah.
you know.
Let's deconstruct and unlearn that.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah, because then
Mhm.
that leads to other problems potentially down the line, right? And
Mhm.
it can bleed into other areas of your life where it
Yeah.
doesn't need to be like that.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
want you to live fully as yourself, even in the
Mhm.
bathroom.
Mhm.
Maybe that should be
Yes.
my new tagline.
Yes, I love this so much. Yeah. So practical too.
Yeah,
Literally everyone is going to have an opportunity to practice this multiple times a day.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Brittany, what does it mean? for you to take up space personally in your own life? Like, how are you thinking about that or engaging in that?
Yeah, that question is making me think of when I first got into this kind of work,
Yeah.
more so around like the menstruation side and just
Mhm.
learning more about all the phases and what it meant to have a period and all these good things. And I remember being on like the corner of a street, like in downtown San Diego, Encinitas, actually, where I reside. And these guys were asking, like, oh, yeah, what are you guys talking about? What are you guys doing? I'm like, well, I'm in luteal phase. So I am probably just going to go take a nap at home and do a low key workout or go on a walk. And they're like, luteal phase? And I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
the phase that's right before your period. And they're like, period? And they
Uh-huh.
were like kind of shocked that I even said these words and they didn't know what luteal meant. But I just feel like, yeah, you're not gonna minimize me here in just what's so natural and normal. So I feel like that's definitely one way. And I feel like it's kind of taken on a whole new life, I guess, in terms of the pleasure and the embodiment pieces. And yeah, I feel like even on social media, as long as it's kosher with Instagram and TikTok, you can try
Yeah,
to
I
hide it
know.
all
How are
you
you
want, but
navigating that? Yeah, we can go offline and talk about that. But
yeah, I mean, you can find your workarounds a little bit, but just
uh-huh.
sharing as much as I can without being shadow banned. That's where I kind of do that and take up the space.
Mm. I love the work you're doing. I feel so just grounded and also inspired from our conversation. If any listeners want to find you, see what you're doing, see your work, how can they do that?
Of course. Thank you for having me and thank you for listening to all of this. So I feel like the easiest way is Instagram for now, but
Yeah,
my website is my name, Brittney Ellers. That's spelled BRITNEYELERS.com. And that'll take you to my page and my offerings and all the things going on there. But yeah, where you can get
amazing.
that free download of the
Yeah, we'll
rituals.
put that in the show notes, your ebook and where else people can find you. That'll be an amazing resource.
Perfect, of course.
Okay,
Yay.
well, thanks, Brittany.
Thank you, Cassie. See you guys later.
Thank you for listening to Taking Up Space. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it to be a resource for you in your own embodiment, healing, and body liberation journey. I hope you can continue the conversation with me over on social media by sharing your thoughts, offering your ideas and suggestions for future episodes, or just connecting. You can find me on Instagram at Inner Atlas Therapy. If you liked this episode and want to support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review the show in your preferred podcast platform. And share this episode with a friend. This ensures that more people can find the pod and will amplify our message of body liberation for all. If you haven't checked it out yet, I have a free Taking Up Space workbook available. This workbook will have you engage in self-reflection and embodied practices as you navigate your own journey of taking up space. You can find this free resource on my website, inneratlastherapy.com. I'll also link in the show notes some additional resources I've developed in my online shop to help you deepen into your own embodiment, healing, and body liberation work. Thanks again for being here. And until next time, I hope you join me in the resistance and find some ways to take up space this week. I'll see you next time.